Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I want to talk about the video game Metaphor ReFantazio. This isn't going to be a spoiler discussion or anything. It's going to be like a general non-spoiler, just giving my general thoughts about the game because I just beat it, rolled credits about maybe 20 minutes ago prior to me starting this recording. And so, you know, just for anyone that's coming across this that's like, oh, I've heard of that game, but I haven't really heard a lot about it. Or maybe you are someone who's already played and beaten it and you're just curious like, oh, like here's someone else who played and beaten what their general thoughts were. Like I said, I won't go into like too many specifics, but I'll break down some of my thoughts about things. I'll include time codes so you can kind of jump around to the different topics. This is going to be very fast and loose, so I don't fully know everything that I'm going to really discuss. I'm just going to go by, you know, what comes to mind. But just in general, what were my initial thoughts? I thought it was great. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I've not played a lot of Atlus games. This is probably like the 5th Atlus game I've ever played. I played Digital Devil Saga, Shin Megami Tensei, the Digital Devil Saga 2. Yes, I've never played one, but I played 2. It was weird. Persona 5, Persona 5 Strikers, and there was, was it the Raidu versus the Soulless Army? I believe that, and now this is like the 5th Atlus game I ever played. So, but either way, I just thoroughly enjoyed the game. I thought it was a great game. I love the story. I think it has a lot of it deals with a lot of mature elements. I'm also surprised that the game's only rated T for teen, because I would just expect it to be mature, but especially with some of like the themes and elements. Like, I mean, it's kind of a spoiler, but not really. But a major theme in this game is racism, because there's so many different tribes and species, and and in universe, like the different tribes believe they are higher or above like other tribes. So that's a really thematic thing and hurdle that like kind of gets brought up continuously throughout the entire game. So it deals with some pretty dark stuff and themes, and some pretty hefty stuff gets kind of discussed and talked about in this game. And I love the characters. There's a lot of fun characters in this. What's also interesting too, what kind of makes this, I mean, especially on the Atlus front, is you don't have a primarily silent protagonist. In fact, the main character, even though it's in traditional, you know, Persona, you know, links of where, hey, you can name your protagonist. Yes, he does have a canonical name, which I think is interesting because I think it's based on the regions. I think in like his canonical name in English is Will, but I think in different countries it has like a canonical name, if I remember. It's been a while ago since I looked this up, so I could be wrong. But yeah, your protagonist does talk. You can choose some of his dialogue, but he still talks. And that's kind of nuts and crazy, like I said, in comparison to like some other Atlus games in particular. I mean, not even, you know, especially like most of the Shin Megami Tensei games, or even most of the Persona games, you know. So it's just kind of interesting. I love the art style and aesthetic, especially some of like the aesthetical choices, like the main menu, how that is stylized is so cool. And like kind of pulling from Persona 5, how like they have like those scene transitions, like, oh, you went to a different screen, and like how that was done in Persona 5. They do a similar version of, but like a more updated version of that for this game, which I like. Once again, this game just had such neat art style and aesthetic. And speaking of the art style, I even like a lot of the monster design, specifically the humans. They have like the weirdest and like most grotesque designs, which is so funny to say outside of the context of this universe of being like, oh, the human designs. You know, if you're unfamiliar with this game, in this universe, the term human has a different connotation in this world and a different meaning, and refers to a different group, you know. So I think it's really interesting. They had like the most like unhinged or like weird design, and like even weird design by Atlus standards, you know. So, but I just think like just graphically and just art style and, like I said, aesthetic wise, is so beautiful. I also want to talk about like the setting itself. I think is so interesting because I talk about this video game franchise all the time, the Trails franchise or the Kaseki franchise, specifically the Cold Steel games, which are the Erebonia arc, and then the Daybreak games, which is the Calvert arc. They have I consider those like Persona light, in that they have a day like calendar system, but it's not to the day-to-day situation as like a actual Persona game. So I consider those games having Persona light elements. I'd consider this kind of Persona medium elements, considering like, well, I mean, for one, it's made by the same company that makes the Persona games, but also because it's not as lengthy. Like whereas Persona games traditionally are like a full year, this game's like 4 or 5 months in total. I think it starts off in June and it pretty much ends in October, if I remember correctly, or November, something like that. But it has that Persona-esque like day-to-day life aspect. But the reason why I'm also bringing it up, like, it's so interesting to have that type of Persona element in this aesthetic, because all the Persona games are set modern day because you're going to school and stuff like that. But obviously having it in this setting is closer to like the Trails of Cold Steel games, like where like or the Trails Through Daybreak, where it's like day-to-day stuff, but it's not like, because those aren't modernized, but they have like modernized elements to it. This as well. It's a really interesting like thing to put the Persona lens on, with the like kind of medieval aesthetic that this world has, and I just think that's so really neat. Obviously, it is a turn-based game, taking a lot of similar beats and elements from like the Shimigami Tenseis and the Persona games, where it's that once you exploit an enemy's weakness, the past extra turn, I forgot what the proper name for it is, but it's like the name for their battle system where like you exploit an enemy's weakness, you get an extra turn. If you miss, you lose some turns and stuff like that. It's got that same style. What I think is kind of a neat introduction is the archetypes, which I think are really fascinating. And especially because, like, for one, I think a really interesting change is where traditionally in the Persona games, only the main protagonist could have all the personas in the game. Whereas, like, every other character is given one specific persona. Obviously, they can, you develop their confidant, and eventually that persona can shift into its next form, so on and so forth. But which they have that in this game as well. There are multiple stages to everyone's archetype. But what I think is interesting is, whereas, like I said, only the main protagonist could have other personas, in this game, all the other protagonists can unlock every other archetype. Each character has a ultimate once, how like everyone has like their ultimate personas, like their ultimate form for their persona. Everyone has one of those that cannot be copied. Everyone's got a unique persona to them, archetype to them, but every other archetype, every other character can use, so you can mix and match, not just with one character. So it adds to like the variety in which you can like do techniques and stuff, and how it affects the flow of battle, where like you kind of have to build your team around the main protagonist, which you have a little more leeway depending on how you explore people's archetypes that they have unlocked. So it's just an interesting taking that concept and spreading it, what was always initially given just to the main protagonist of the Persona games, and now making it applicable to the entire party. Is just really neat, especially when you get into some of like the synchronization moves, or they're basically like super moves based on like archetypes. Some calls for like different archetypes, others calls for archetypes of the same type in the battle. It is a 4-party battle system, in case you're curious. Once again, if you're coming across this and you've heard of the game but you've never checked it out so far. But yeah, I'm a big fan of like 4 party members. I don't know why. It's always just a preference thing, but it's just like I prefer 4 over 3, but that's just a me thing. I talked a little bit about the main characters early on, obviously because this is Persona-esque. You do have confidants, or rather followers, in this game. Funny enough, there's like at least one character that's a follower that I thought was going to be, I won't spoil who it is, but there's a certain character I was so certain you would join the party. You felt like you would be the party character, but it's like, well, some other character already kind of fills your role to some extent, without really getting, like I said, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a character, I was like, man, like when I started the game and we got introduced to this particular character, I was like, oh, I thought for sure you'd be a main party member. Turns out, no, you're a follower. There's other party members I wasn't quite sure, like, there's another character I thought like, oh, you were going to join the party, but it ended up being another character. I was like, well, it would make sense to be one of you two, but I was expecting the other rather than the person you ultimately get. So I thought that was fascinating. I want to circle back for a little bit back to, like I brought up earlier, some of the themes. I kind of got into the more like depressing and like rough themes of it, but the rough and harsh themes are important to keep in mind, but there is still this very optimistic angle to the story of trying to build a better world, kind of like this notion of fantasies and utopias ideas and trying to do what you can, like what is the right decision, what is the right course of action to building a better world, and just the competing thoughts of, well, this is the best way, or it's like, this is the best way, well, this is the best way for our people, well, that would contradict and hurt this people. So it's a really like heavy thing, and I think it's nice that like there isn't like a fix-all like solution of like, hey, the hero saves the day. It's like, no, there's still problems, and I think it's kind of interesting where it's like, you know, being idealistic and wanting the best, it's fine and dandy, but, you know, idealism can only take you so far, but it needs to be the foundation to help you put yourself in a better position to help the world. So yeah, it's just kind of really interesting, like from beginning to end, like that, how that shifts and plays throughout the game. I mean, obviously going back to the story for a little bit too, how it went directions I wasn't expecting. Some nice, I don't know if you call them twists, they might be twists, but certain developments I didn't see coming. I was like, oh, wasn't expecting that. With some of the character storylines, and there's one particular storyline I'll bring up early on. I was like, oh, the second location you go to in the game, well, like I said, I don't want to get too specific. The conclusion of that story, it's kind of clear cut. It was going to end the way it does. I was still hoping like, well, they wouldn't actually do that, right? I'd actually kind of wanted not to have that conclusion, and it still has a conclusion that the game's like, no, it's going to have this conclusion, and it does. I was actually really sad. I was like, oh, that's a bummer. I kind of, but it's like, it's just, it plays into like the tragedy of this world, where it's just like there's a domino effect that kind of starts from like the structure of this world and some of the terrible elements, how it plays out on an individual level, not just on a macro level, but also on a micro level. And that's just one of those instances where it's like, it's kind of it's a macro thing, but it's also like a micro story thing, and on a personal level, I'm like, I just wish that it played out differently. I feel bad for the resolution to that story, especially how that builds into like what is like the third location you go to, which is like the third arc. It just, like I said, I'm dancing around it, but it's just that storyline early on, I was like, oh, that's a bummer. I was legitimately sad after that storyline played out the way it did. But yeah, like I'm just rambling at this point. But like I said, just in general, I thought it was a great game. I'd love to see what they would do with a sequel. Obviously, the director of the game was asked about any potential sequels. Obviously, like some time has passed. Like this came out like October of last year, I believe. But yeah, like he says, like he'd love to explore maybe different settings and different circumstances, but like there currently are no official plans. Like Atlus is working on something else right now, but you know, the room is always open for there to potentially be more in the future. So I'd love to see what they would do. I doubt they'd continue in this world. It probably would be like a new setting. They'd probably do it like the Shin Megami Tensei games or the Persona games, or like, you know, even though like the Persona games are relatively kind of in the same world for the most part, they're in different locations and there's some overlap, but not a lot. Same thing, but the Shin Megami Tensei are pretty much like, no, they're separate worlds, to my understanding. Having never played a lot of, I'm only tangentially familiar with the Shin Megami Tensei games, so like I don't think they connected. I think they are just their own pocket worlds and stuff. But anyway, but yeah, those are my thoughts in general. I don't know if I'll ever do like a heavy spoiler like discussion on the game. If you are curious about it, if enough people want me to do it or would love to hear my spoiler thoughts, I might do one in the future. I'll probably play through the game again. I still need to get like maybe 3 or 4 more trophies, I think. So I would need to, I'm going to play through it again anyway, but maybe like if someone would want me to really do a spoiler one, I'll probably like play through the game and take some pretty extensive notes and do like a really deep dive spoiler cast type of thing. But you know, that's only if people really, if anyone cares at all, you know. Or, you know, maybe one day I'll just be like, you know what, I'm going to do it regardless if people want me to or not. So that's always also a possibility. So, but yeah, obviously, like I said, these are my general thoughts. I'd love to get to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Whether you are just starting the game for whatever, you know, maybe you just got the game and it's just started, or maybe you've already played through it and beaten it, maybe even multiple times. I'd love to get to know everyone's thoughts in the comments down below, how they felt about the game. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What were some expectations you had? And did the game meet them or exceed them or fall short in some capacity? I just love to know your thoughts in general. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.